Today, we're going to be talking about something that you all may be very familiar with. I'm sure most of you all are, unless you've been hiding under a rock somewhere. But the bird flu is in the news and on social media again, and a lot of people are scared. Some are wondering, is this real or is it fake? Some people are scared to death that the bird flu is going to just wipe out all their animals and even them. And some people are afraid that, the government's going to come take their animals because of it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And joining me, I have two guests that will be joining me in this conversation today. I have Tom Watkins from Murray McMurray Hatchery. He is the president and co-owner there, and he's also a fellow homesteader. And you guys have like 130 plus varieties of birds and things like that at Murray McMurray Hatchery.
Yeah, yes, sir. Chickens, ducks, quail, pheasants, turkeys, all of the varieties. We're stockpiling them ourselves. So
that's pretty exciting. So he's very familiar with dealing with all types of birds. And we also have Ginger, who is also part of Murray McMurray Hatchery. She is like the poultry marketing guru and PR lady that goes around and hangs out with us homesteaders from all these different places we go. So welcome, Tom and Ginger. So I'm just going to dive right directly into it. And I'm going to open it up. Whoever wants to start talking about it first. Is the bird flu real or is it fake?
Yeah, I'm going to take that one. It's very real. So really, we've been dealing. Bird flu has been it's part of poultry history. What we were dealing with is considered high path avian influenza. So it's a highly transmissible disease in the poultry. It has existed in poultry previous to this. This one's just a more deadly variety, but it is actually the same strain we've been fighting since 2022. So we're 2025 now, about 3 years of this same perpetual seasonal. It's very seasonal because it follows the migratory birds. And so as the migratory birds are flying, we tend to get those flocks and infections along those migratory bird paths. So you can see that in the states affected, the timings that they're affected, and so yeah, it's absolutely real, and we're still plodding through it.
So you don't, in your opinion, you don't think it's something that the government just constructed and put together, and now they're just marketing it on the news and just as a reason to take people's birds away?
No, the thing about it is, with it being so virulent, it's incredibly deadly. So what you're seeing is before there's no. Yes, we do test. We test monthly for it. I've never got a positive test that I didn't already know was positive because it kills your birds. In domesticated poultry, you're looking at about a 90% mortality rate. Wow. They're dead. That's the first symptom. It's like, oh, they look a little good. You come out in the morning, and you've got massive keelovers, and so it's not like, oh, we'll detect that, and then the government comes out. It's like, oh, there's something very wrong here, and then the government comes out.
Oh, wow!
So that's they die first. Yeah, it's not really a question of, oh, if I have it or not. You know.
Wow. So when you said you kind of can see that it's happening before you even had it tested. So what are some of the things, some of the symptoms that start happening?
Yeah. So like I said, the number one thing is we've got it. We've had it in our barns previous where we've been open about that. It was a little bit over a year ago. So it was November of
23.
Years of 23, November of 23. So the beginning of our season last year. So we're just a little bit past a year of it. And like I said, the number one thing is we have about 5,000 birds in one building, individual pens, all floor raised chickens or roosters. Within that pen, the first day we saw about 60 mortalities. Within the next day, which at that point we had sent the tests off, that pen was completely wiped out. It was following the next pen and the next pen. It's the first symptom you're going to see. A lot of avian diseases They look like they get colds, they get snuffy noses, things like that. You'll see they'll go off water. They look sick, like they're not moving around. They kind of crunch their head down. There's not enough notice for this. By the time your birds are within, are exposed to it, that's one of the first things you're going to see is mortality.
Wow. Wow.
It's devastating.
Wow. Now with that, is it like, what's the call to action? Like, is it just, should you automatically cull your birds, or what? People are asking about that.
Yeah. So as a member of NPIP, the National Poultry Improvement Plan, in order for us to get indemnity, to get paid for our flock if something happens, it's really almost worthless as far as what they cover. But it is something that we have a reportable disease. So it is, if you have those types of mortality, you have to report that to your local entity. So that's the NPIP. So we have a local person here for Iowa, and so we'll go through Iowa State University as well to get diagnostics, and then that's when the USDA steps in. I am of the opinion that there are anything that didn't succumb to that disease has got some kind of resistance to that, and I would rather breed that bird for those natural immunities than to just kill off everything. What the government does, the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, why they do it is because we're such a heavily stocked state for poultry. There are barns literally all around us. For Highline International is one of the largest egg producers in the world. Their main hatchery is 20 miles down the road. Iowa is the second largest egg producing state in the nation outside of California, even though we're this small little state. And so to keep it from spreading, potentially, they have a zero tolerance policy. You euthanize everything. There's different ways they go about and do that. That's their current policy, and we can't change that. I've advocated for other options, but at this time, that's what the only thing we can do.
Wow.
The other thing is that the industry that's kind of based on birds that, say, like broilers that have a 6 to 8 week lifespan, so they can get up to speed very quickly and repopulate a barn, turn over everything. The hard part for people like us is that we have breeds that we've kept around for over 100 years, and those are breeder flocks, and so to get up to speed on some of those, you can't. If you lose them, they're gone.
Yeah.
So it's a little tricky in the differences, because the system is built for the meat system, the commercial meat system, and we don't really fit into that mold very well. So that's why he said the indemnity is not really very helpful to us either. It's also based on birds that are much cheaper.
Well, yeah. Well, I share the philosophy like Tom. Like I can understand why they may have the zero tolerance for areas where you're near other farms where it could easily happen. But I want to save the hardier birds, and I'm sure there's others listening in that they would want to do that as well. It's like a survival of the fittest type of thing. Just the other day, I did a video chat with Mark Metzer from Metzer Farms, and they had been devastated with the bird flu at their farm in California. And one of the perspectives that I got from him that I didn't realize going into our conversation is that also from a business sustainability standpoint, they can't continue to support birds that are sick and just kicking out money and continue to have their business going on. So I never even thought about it from that perspective. Is there anything you want to add along those lines, Tom?
Yeah, obviously, we did. If something in that case, that's those buildings are now infirmaries at that point, and it does take, we wouldn't have space to start even putting down chicks, because that's where they go. I mean, without individual buildings or more places that you could start birds that aren't on that contaminated farm already. Like Metzer's, they're that's his backyard. The hatchery is included on the farm, so then you're already putting that hatchery at risk. So anything that could potentially go out. So hatcheries themselves are very safe because it does not. Even within the egg during the incubation process, it gets too hot for any bacteria, basically, or within the avian influenza specifically, to pass through an egg and then hatch into a chick, especially with the mortality, because it needs a live host. But avian influenza is very easy to kill. Any common cleaners, bleach, Clorox, sunlight, temperature, anything above 80 degrees will help nullify that very quickly. That's why we don't see these spikes in the sun. It lives almost indefinitely in cold, wet areas, which is in the Midwest. That's our fall. That's our winter. That's our spring. So that's when we're seeing, the higher percentages of infections is along those same time frames. So, and different from Metzer's, waterfowl are the carrier hosts. So they are typically asymptomatic. So that might be a case where you would test and get a positive before you knew they were sick. Except for that's changing too. Probably starting around November, December, a lot of the reports that I'm getting are sick waterfowl, specifically around Webster City here. There's a bird conservatory area that they keep open that has had multiple dead birds on it. The Ada Hayden Park, north of Ames, has had multiple birds falling out of the sky. So waterfowl. Wow. So traditionally healthy birds, but they are carriers, are now becoming more sick with it too. So that there's a little change in how it is affecting things.
Wow. So has the virus or whatever mutated to where, or changed in a way that the ducks are now having symptoms with it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any virus will mutate over time, as it spreads and changes. We saw that, with the pandemic, when they would say that there's different variants of a virus. Your common flu, your common cold. If you've ever gotten, say, like a flu shot, and they'll say there's different strains. It's just very common for the nature of a virus to mutate.
So they do sequencing on the birds that they find, all of those things, and we're still, even though we've been fighting this for the last 3 years, we're still on a Eurasian strain. So bird flu has been infecting. It started in China, that Asian continent, decades ago, basically, and they have been fighting it over there. And at some point, a larger migratory bird did cross through. I think the first infections were in California, Oregon, Washington, all up through there in the 2020. So they're in the that flyway, and so even all the same infections, all the same sequencings we're still doing is still the Eurasian strain. There is a North American strain. We're not seeing that showing up in the high path in these birds, so it's not mutated much. But it is, the longer it goes on, which there's not necessarily any end in sight to this.
So with it being something that's been around now for a very long time, why is it that, I guess, all the birds haven't been wiped out? Do you have any ideas or theories on those lines?
Well, like we said, the waterfowl were carrier hosts, specifically geese, where they weren't showing symptoms. They're asymptomatic, but they're also carrying this disease. It was really affecting commercial poultry. It does affect backyard flocks, absolutely. It's just, but it's also, anytime you get into confinement situations where you have lots of birds or lots of fowl in any close environment, 2022 was a little bit unique. They did say a lot of it was tracked in by people, even the USDA going from farm to farm, we got to look at this farm, and then literally, people-wise, taking it to the next place. Biosecurity, basic biosecurity, will also help, any of your, backyard flock people. wearing clean shoes. Not that's the number one thing, really. It's most likely tracked in on manure from somewhere.
So with places that can't, like just say open farms, we're
Mhm.
pasture raising the animals. Not we just don't have our animals confined in spaces. Does that help, or does that increase the risk of getting bird flu? With our
Some of it you can look at what migratory flyway you in. Are you in a migratory path? What we're dealing with is we're having warmer winters, and so the birds aren't going as far south. So you're seeing more birds stick around more locally because water's still open. So they're not going as far south. So you're having more higher populations of migratory birds locally. So where you are really matters too. And I said it's easily controlled with warmer temperatures. So if you're in a warmer area, California's a weird thing, but they have a lot of migratory birds too. They have also a lot of poultry in the state. They are the number one poultry state. So there's, again, a lot of birds there. Anytime you could have your birds covered, whether that's enclosed or not, but like say they're roosting, you're going to be a little bit better off. But it's less of a concern, I think, for backyard flocks. It's just you're going to have less. Everything that lives outside is a little bit hardier.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, that's the best way to raise your birds.
Okay.
Anything.
There's an interesting website that if someone wants to know if they're kind of in a migratory path, we've looked at it. It's called Birdcast. It's birdcast.info. And it's kind of like when you watch the weather radar, and you can pull down and you can see where the birds have been going. And a lot of people are sometimes surprised that the geese migrate overnight, because, usually people are like, well, the birds, don't do well in the dark, but they do migrate overnight. And that website kind of shows the different flyways. And you can also Google the flyways and see the migratory paths. So
one of the things that I've learned from raising chickens is, and especially learning some of the history about them, is that they are like a jungle bird a lot for the most part.
Yep.
Do you think that some of the different breeds and varieties that we are now raising are more susceptible to these things since they are not in, I guess, their original environments? Do you think that has anything to do with it?
It's genetics. So anytime you talk about genetics, there's the Darwinian example is that anything in your past it's a potential to help you in your future, even though it might be really far back. There is some kind of innate, and all of those breeds, again, they are from different areas. Whether that's the United States or whether that's your Mediterranean breeds, your Asiatic breeds, like Cochins, or all of those things, developed in a certain area. And so anytime they're exposed to different things, they have that genetic potential in order to resist things that come back up. So absolutely, yeah.
Now, we've pretty much established at this point that it's real, and you have personally witnessed over the years the effects of this real, and you're not making it up, and you're not in cohorts with the government and trying to promote something that's false. That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
And but I also want to touch on the side of it of the people who are also concerned when they hear the name Fauci and they hear other things come into play in these conversations, and they get afraid or nervous about lockdowns and things like that again. What comments do you have along those lines of how to navigate that and as well?
I don't know. You might have lost me there. I don't know, like what. So the biggest question is, will the bird flu transition into people? Will this become a pandemic in and of itself? It has the potential to. There have been I think almost 70 cases of people catching bird flu. At this point in time, there has not been a person-to-person contact. It has always been fowl or dairy. The dairy, so it's still the bird flu, but it has been in the dairy just as long as it's been in chickens. And so you're seeing that, you're seeing more exposure to people in the dairy industry who are catching bird flu. And a lot of that has to do with how the rates of transmission. So like you're talking about udders, teats, and milk, those are reservoirs where, you're more likely to get exposed. And so a lot of those people are dairy workers or who have been dealing with obviously sick chickens. So, and that could be any disease, in and of itself. So does it have the potential to transition into people? Yes, it does. Is it currently? No. But maybe the USDA is onto something there about not keeping those birds over, where it could potentially infect a person who would then, it would have to mutate to fit the different proteins in people versus animals. So it's been found in dolphins. It's fox, eagles, bears, almost seals, and a lot of those things are things that ate those dead birds. Domestic cats have been the number one thing.
Wow.
So I mean, it's not necessarily that it's going to be a chicken to a person. More specifically, it's probably something like a cat to a person. Those are all zoonotic diseases. So anything within NPIP, any zoonotic diseases are 100%. You're done.
Yeah. Wow.
To keep people safe.
Wow. That's really important to know that it has been around and it's in different animals as well. And it seems like you have a really balanced perspective on the whole subject itself. It's like you've actually dealt with it. You recognize that it is real, but you don't seem to be like panicking and going crazy, pulling your hair out that it's just going to wipe out your birds. You do have some concern.
It did. I mean, it did wipe out our birds. There's 15,000 of them.
Wow.
So and how we culled those birds by hand.
Wow.
There were 4 of us. And you have 24 hours within the USDA. So it was 1 USDA vet and 3 workers. And that included me.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
When, my job is all online and I see a lot of people panic and, you just don't know, you watch headlines and depending on where you get your news, it varies.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to know a couple things. That one is that headlines are different from media to media. You can get the same paper, and depending on where you are, the headline is different. And so, it's not meant to be, a don't trust your media thing, but just try and do research. If you're on a Facebook group, it's probably not the best way of getting reliable information. We've dealt with it. We've seen it face to face. We're not running around, worrying that the sky is falling, but it is horribly detrimental to our business and horribly detrimental to these poor animals. So biosecurity is great. It can do a lot. And to kind of keep your head and be, kind of smart about what you worry about and just kind of do the best you can for your animals. Sometimes you can do the best and you still get sick. Sometimes your animals, you do the best for them and they get sick. But you kind of move forward and do what you can and try and get reliable information. That's the biggest thing. So
That's why we're here. I mean, we did it. We did it.
I can tell you the biggest thing that I hear is, get this medicine and treat your flock. It's not, a wormer is not going to save them. Sadly, it might, like Tom says, it's going to increase your egg output because you're going to get rid of some worms that you didn't know you had.
It's great.
That's really great.
You should worm your birds once a year. Anything that eats their own poop, or other people's poop, should get wormed. I mean, that includes your domestic dogs, domestic cats, and domestic chickens. They are all scratching the grass. So
that's good to know. Any particular wormer you recommend for chickens?
That's the one you can afford, because that stuff can add up really fast.
It's the one you can afford.
Any of them work. What you run into is they're not labeled for small dosages, so you have to figure out poundages. Because if it's like, if it's a cattle wormer or horse wormer, it's like, well, that's an 1,800 pound animal, so I need to scale that to a 3 pound animal. It's just like, I need one eyedropper. I'm like, so you can do it. It's just a lot. It's just some math, lots of math.
Yeah, everything.
Thanks for that.
But they're all essentially the same. So.
That's a bonus tip there from Tom. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing also is just don't worry that people are going to come to your property and, fake test your birds or report you or,
nobody's showing up. They don't have that kind of people. So
they don't. And the USDA it's a big organization, but like the guy that comes to help us when we've had issues, it's just a dude who has a family and kids in schools. He's not like a big thing that's going to come and take your farm and take your birds and murder your birds for you.
The USDA is typically a local office. Like the guy's 30 minutes from here, and there's multiple of them. So it's
like insurance salesmen or anybody else.
It is small. Like it's easy to vilify, large government entities because they're large. And it's like, well, that's actually just my neighbor. Like literally, my neighbor worked for the USDA. He calibrated thermometers. That was his whole job.
Wow.
They have really good benefits, and you got family, you want a job.
So,
but if you have it, you'll know. We get calls, from friends and other poultry farmers and stuff, and they're like, well, what if I think I have it? And I'm like, oh no,
Yeah.
It's not a cold. So.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I really appreciate you all coming on here and adding balance. It was another reason why I wanted to have you all on here. Is I knew you would provide balance to the whole subject, because you have some people in one group, they're like, we're just all going to die from this virus, and then you have another group that's like you were just talking about, Ginger, that the government's going to come take all my animals. Oh no, I see it all over the news now. That means they're coming for me, and I'm not going to be able to homestead. I'm not going to have any animals. But there needs to be balance on these subjects. There's so many different, on top of fake news, there's also all types of conspiracies out there that people are just coming up with out of the blue and accusing people falsely for being in cahoots that they have no factual information on why they're coming up with these things, and people believe it.
Yeah. So that honestly, like that's how the NPIP, the National Poultry Improvement Plan, is a branch of the USDA. It was founded to keep the USDA from writing the legislation on for these things. So if we write it ourselves, which I'm a voting member of this board, then the USDA doesn't, and so they don't. We're happy with what you did, so we're not going to even poke our head into it. So as long as you have a plan for what you would do, if you have sick animals, then they stay out of it.
Yeah,
that's all that is. So.
That's encouraging to hear. I'm sure a lot of people don't even know about you guys.
Nobody wants more oversight.
Yeah.
So,
and that was also another thing that I learned. I think you touched on it here just a minute ago there, Ginger, is that the USDA and these government bodies, they don't have the manpower to go to every single homestead and
God, no.
farm to do
They don't
that.
care. They don't care about that.
No.
The USDA cares about trade, and as long as we don't interfere with trade, then they're not going to interfere with you. So when we talk about the largest producers of eggs, it's because those eggs are getting exported to a different country.
Yeah. What percentage of it? There's a huge percentage of
It's
chicken that's
30%.
exported.
30% of all chickens raised in the United States, whether that's chickens, eggs, or parts, is exported outside of the United States.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not the most, but you think about what we're raising. It's a commodity. That's what the USDA is looking at. You are a commodity that can be traded for money. So
Yeah. They don't want us. They don't want setters and
their
chicken people.
Their whole philosophy on why we euthanize the birds that we do is so we don't mess up trade. So another country doesn't say, well, you guys have been dealing with bird flu, or this could be from an infected flock, and we don't want to bring that into our country. So they just have a zero tolerance policy. That's it.
Yeah. That's really good info to know, and I'm sure that assures a lot of people, including myself, to have that information, because it's not readily available, and it's circulated more of the false stuff, sadly, than it is actual things like that are beneficial to people, for people to know. So there you go, you guys. You heard it here. You heard it from Tom and Ginger. You don't have to worry about the government coming to take your chickens and ducks. So yeah. So appreciate that. So I do want to ask you all a little bit, if you could provide just a little bit more info on what people like me and others could do just to keep our flocks healthy. I know you touched on it a little bit, Tom, with raising them outside, but if there's any other things that you have, please share that.
I'd say the biggest one is to not bring like swap meats or things like that. And that's basic biosecurity for any disease, let alone avian influenza. Like that's anytime you bring specifically adult breeds or birds onto a farm with existing birds, they are going to have, like I said, things that grow up in certain areas are going to have resistance to a certain number of things, whether that's Marek's disease, coccidiosis, all of those things. There are different strains across the United States. There are 7 strains of Marek's. Anytime you bring adult birds with another adult birds, you have the potential to pass diseases. So try to limit that as much as possible. Sometimes that's like, it's neighbor had some birds, couldn't keep them anymore. Yeah, sure, throw it in. Like, again, and then basic. My biggest one is wear clean shoes or wear designated shoes. I have my chicken chore shoes that I do my chicken chores with. I have my boots that I do my other animals with. So, and it's not I don't have time. I don't go change my clothes, swab, put on stuff, to do my stuff at home. Nobody's got time for that. Like,
Yeah.
But if you go to a friend's homestead or farm, don't wear the shoes that you're going to wear within your own flock.
Okay.
So
everyone,
don't wear them to the farm store and the feed store. Little things like that. So, don't take your shovel over and dig up poop at your neighbor's farmstead and then go and shovel it in your own. Then you've just moved their poop to your house. So.
And in addition to that, say someone their birds are sick. What should someone do when they discovered that, or have an idea or suspicion that they may be sick?
There are a lot of, we work with Iowa State University. That's our diagnostic lab. Like it happens to be close. That's the closest one we have. It's also one of the best universities in the nation for poultry specifically. Helps that Iowa's number 1 or number 2 poultry state. Purdue University is probably one of the top poultry universities. You can take samples of whether that's saliva. And there's a lot of things. Like some of it is just look at your birds. Do they have fresh water? Like, are they dehydrated recently? Are they going through the right amount of water? Like I said, birds get sick. A lot of it is respiratory time. So at the same time we have our flu season, like birds get sick too. If winter's really hard because you might, they go in the coop to keep them warm. Well, it gets really humid in there. And they get congested. They get dust. They get scratched. They can get dust in their eyes, scratch their eyes. You know, kind of having a semi-clean coop. You know, mine's not clean. I'm doing deep litter method. Like that keeps it warm for me. We're less than 20 degrees for a high this entire week. My coop is probably running about 35 to 40 with no heat, just because I keep enough litter to keep, it's composting basically at this point with some chickens. So keeps the water open. You can find a local vet if they will treat them. If not, then you can send samples over to, a number of different universities. Other than that, just basic care. You might isolate them, make sure they're warm. They're not get frostbite. Look for things like fleas, lice, mites. Dogs and cats get fleas. Chickens get mites, which are a arachnid. Fun fact: they're a little spider.
Yeah. Now, do you provide diatomaceous earth baths for your flocks?
I included it in my bedding.
Okay.
So I just kind of sprinkle it on occasionally. So anytime they have a dust bath, that can help with that. But you can see if they have an infestation, it might be worth something. Neem oil, peppermints, things like that. If it's really bad, you might have to get like the real stuff. But there are options. Give them a bath.
There we go.
It's fun. It's not fun.
Yeah, I've done that for my ducks. I haven't done that for my chickens. I don't think. My wife may have done that with the chicken or two. I can't remember.
But there's hundreds and hundreds of respiratory illnesses that chickens can get. So if they're not just all keeling over, they might just have a respiratory illness too. So, remain calm, figure out, what they have. If you've ever seen a sick chicken, it sounds like a little percolator, kind of like we do when we have, or you have kids with juicy chest and nose and eyes and they get snotty like people do. So, but yeah.
There are a lot of, like I said, there's people on each side of this particular issue, but there are people on like, well, what do you treat a chicken with, like, as well? Some are like, well, it's chicken, like you can eat it, so it depends. Like, what are you willing? Is it a pet to you? Then maybe you do one option. Otherwise, warm water, food, separate it. See if it gets better. If it doesn't, you move on. So.
Yeah, that's where the I'm in. I'm in that group that do what you can, separate the ones that are sick, try to tend to them, but let the others keep going and living their life, take care of them, do your best you can to keep their terrain and area healthy for them. Yeah. But just do the best you can, because I try to breed my birds as well, because forbid anything happen to you guys and that you don't have birds. I wouldn't want to see those breeds go away. So I want to do my part to try to preserve those birds, those breeds as well. So if I'm just not looking to cull 100% if they are sick. So that's me.
No.
So yeah. All righty. Well, I really appreciate you all, Ginger and Tom, for being here, being on and chat with me and adding balance to this subject on the bird flu. So hopefully people will take it to heart. And you, Ginger, you provided some tips of how people can find out information. And Tom, you've provided solid evidence or solid experience of seeing it yourself and have been able to attest that, hey, it is a real thing. So I like your balance and approach to this subject. So we appreciate that. So how do you, Tom, manage to have that balance? Because you're responsible for a lot of birds.
Yeah. One day at a time, I'm not saying if I get a phone call, it doesn't start the heart a little bit, but that's PTSD, I guess. Not quite, but not to that extent. But again, we're doing our best, and we're, I guess, at this point hoping that's enough. So we I don't know that we'd do it again. Like if something happened, again, it's, potential to put McMurray Hatchery out of business. So we have to take that, that's 108 years of breeding. So it's a very serious threat to our chickens and to our livelihoods. But so we're keeping our feet clean, Yeah.
And what can people like me and others who get birds from you guys, what can we do to continue to support you all, especially when in times like Metzer Farms and go through things like this? Because it was, you said 2023 was when it happened most recently, or was it 2022?
Yep.
And I think it was one of the breeds that I actually raised as well. That was it, the Niederrheiner or the Delaware that you guys had some of
the
that
Delaware, yeah.
So I was really bummed about that, but it just put an extra pride in me that I've had some to continue raising that. Hey, I want to continue to. Hey, maybe one day if there is something that does happen again, maybe I can contribute to increasing your numbers again.
We had to do that. We had to go because we lost some breeds we couldn't replace. So we went back to some people we'd gotten some, fairly locally, so we could replace those. That's what we had to do. So I appreciate it. I think breeding your own chickens is as I advocate for. Please.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is, still don't lose confidence in the businesses. They're just family-owned businesses. The Metzers are really good friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're just a few people in Iowa trying to sell chickens, and when we had it, the biggest thing I told people is don't be afraid to get chickens.
So, hatcheries themselves are very secure, with the biosecurity coming into the hatchery and everything leaving the hatchery, and that's for pre-bird flu and any diseases we hatch in a hospital-like environment. It is exceptionally clean. So Metzer Farms too. Anything that leaves those facilities are good to go, like 100%. So,
wow, that's fantastic.
The Metzers like us have several properties, several farms, and so while they may have dealt with what's happened at the California farm, there's still the Tennessee facility, and so like we had one farm that went, but the others were fine, and so you just have to have confidence that these families are gonna, ship you the safest, healthiest birds, and just continue to support them. We're just families. We can't afford to lose all that business.
Yeah.
So.
And I can attest from personal experience of years getting birds from you guys that they're top-notch quality birds, and I really appreciate what we get from you all.
Thank you.
And I also think that there's another takeaway from this is that having a diverse locations of where the breeds are seems to make a big difference as well. So that's something that keep.
Yeah, that's on my goal, to kind of have things separate again. So maybe we wouldn't potentially lose more flocks, but it's time and money.
Yeah.
We all have that.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys for being on again. I'm not going to hold you up anymore. I really appreciate you carving out time in your afternoon to spend and chat with me. Is there any final comments that either of you have as we close?
Just thanks for having us, Mike.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. My pleasure. Take care, guys. Thanks again.